Wow. I mean, what a performance. I've just been going through the chats and the kind of responses people have been giving. Amazing, amazing. I mean, thank you so much, Team Allegedly, for putting this together. Uh, we work very closely with children and victims of sexual abuse, and these are the questions we keep confronting every day, and even in our society. So thank you so much. Many congratulations to the whole team. And now I begin. Now it's time for the panel discussion, and for panel discussion we have Miss Urvashi Butalia, ma'am. She is a feminist writer and publisher and activist. uh, ma'am is the co-founder of Kali for Women, India's first feminist publishing house, and now director of Zuban. She's also the president of Huck's Center for Child Rights and has been a part of Huck's journey since its inception. Thank you, ma'am. Uh, Urvashi ma'am's main interests are gender and history, and she has several works to her credit, key among which is her path-breaking study of partition, titled The Other Side of Silence: Voices from Partition of India. She is also recipient of
Sela,
several.
Sela, bas karo.
And just last one, it's important that you have received many awards, including Padma Shri.
Acha.
And ma'am will be moderating the whole discussion. So, ma'am, we have Miss Malika Taneja. She is the director of the play, and we all will hear more from Miss Malika. Then we have Justice Shakdar, who is a sitting judge of Delhi High Court, and he's also served at Chennai Madras High Court, and Sir is heading the Juvenile Justice Committee of Delhi High Court. Then we have Ms. Anuja Gupta. She's a co-founder and executive director of Rahi Foundation. She's a human rights activist and been working with victims of sexual abuse since last 20 years. And then we have Advocate Vrinda Grover. Ma'am is a well-known lawyer, researcher, and human rights activist. She's been representing women and children on many and other issues. Ma'am has also been actively engaged with UN and been a founder member of WGHR in India. So I welcome everybody on the group, and now I would like to hand over to Urvashi, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thanks, Sela. Thank you, everybody. Malika, Sharna, thank you. And everyone I can see here, Jholi, Machuka, Banti, Sansani, Bubbly, Chakri, Nobody, Jhumki, Chamko, Sherni, Chabili, Begum, and Rajkumari, and so on. All of you, thank you for this wonderful performance. You know, I've seen this Malika's troupe perform this play maybe I don't know how many times now, and I've seen it go through many avatars, and it never fails to move me. And every time there's something new, and the way you've adapted it to the digital medium is pretty amazing. So, you know, there's a whole range of questions that we can discuss, which the performance raises, which the content of the performance raises, which are centered around issues such as consent and justice and perception of who the person is, the victim, or however you describe her, the actions, and how difficult it is to actually judge what is performance and what's the kind of information that is, what is consent, and what is the kind of information that is needed to arrive at how to judge that in law, and how difficult and intrusive and invasive that is. I don't know what we can actually, I was thinking of asking all of you these questions, but I think given the power of the performance, what I would like to do is change that a bit and really ask you to react to it, keeping these things in mind. And I'm going to ask each of you one by one. So I'm going to start first with Malika, because Malika, for you, because there have been so many different performances to different kinds of audiences, what has changed? What do you yourself feel about the performance and about the ways in which issues are being raised by you and your team?
I think the one thing that is constant is the fact that the piece is forever a work in progress. How much ever I want to settle on it, I can't, because you just cannot settle on the conversation. So since we first did the show at Zuban Mela, which was September 18, I think, to now, it just refuses to settle down. And it's because I think the conversation refuses to settle down. I mean, we've just begun the turmoil of the conversation, and we are kind of in it. We are in the washing machine, as it were. Na, abhi to hum ghum rahe hain. तो उसमें फिर it's very difficult to say this is it and that's it. The 2 times now we've worked with the chorus, the piece. Now this is the second time we've come together. We are going to have shows again in February. That will be a third time we come together. And this conversation just has to keep developing. It's the reason also one is choosing to keep it as a live show and not just record videos, all of it. So that we can keep adapting to everything that is happening around us. So I think in all the one is that it doesn't settle, and the second is because it's interactive, we have a constant feedback from audiences, and that constant feedback helps us tweak, change, I would even say improve the nuance with which we are talking. Like the chorus itself, I feel has changed things. It's challenged a lot the conversation that Shenna and I have, and the conversation that we are trying to generate around it, because there's suddenly the presence of so many other lives and experiences that have started to push at this, well, for the lack of a better way to put it, this central conversation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. That's really quite interesting. And, if you see as I said, I've seen many performances, so I have seen it grow. And every time I ask myself, was that there in the last one? And I'm pretty sure it wasn't. So, and the last one that you did, I saw quite recently. So there was a comparison with that. Let me turn to Justice Sakhdar. First of all, what did you think of the play and the issues it raised? But also in your own work, particularly the troublesome issue of consent and how it is understood in law, and then also how it is, if it's so confusing between two adults to talk about it and to get a handle on it, how does that work for children? Justice Akhtar, you need to unmute yourself. You're on mute.
I thought I was. Sorry, my mistake. Thank you so much, Ms. Butalia. Brinda, Anuja, Malika, I didn't know you were the director as well as the actor. It was a wonderful performance. And sometimes I think the discussion spoils it all. The panel discussion, you see a good performance and you go away with certain impression in your mind. And when you talk about it like this, I feel that sometimes ruins it all. But then we are here. And of course, Haq for organizing it, Bharti. I can't see her on the panel, but I'm sure she's hooked on the BC. So my reaction to this is it couldn't have been done better. And I take, I didn't know that this was done earlier because I hadn't seen this performance earlier. But when I connected to what was shown in the performance, it was obvious that this was very topical because they picked up something which happened and was reported only 7 days ago about a bizarre judgment where, POXO was construed in a particular way. And I'm sure, students of law, lawyers like Vrinda, others were pretty amazed at how did this come about. But yeah, that's the point that Malika was making. And I think it should be what she said, work in progress, because you keep adding on layers and you keep removing some or whatever. That's the director's. So wonderfully done. In fact, My girls are not here, and I would want my girls to see this as well, because they should know they're growing, they're young. I mean, they're just in school. One of them is in college, and I want them to see this. My girls, and my wife, who's also into this area. So yeah, my reaction was that these are things that need to be talked about, spoken about, and the society needs to be sensitized, because uh, since I know Vrinda, I know unless you have enough exposure as to what it all means, you will not uh, sort of imbue your judgments with that sensitivity. You will not be. They genuinely, some of them make mistakes. I mean, what Malika's play presented, uh, I can tell you 7 out of 8, 7 out of 8. Vrinda can correct me on that. 7 out of 8, or maybe 7 out of 10, okay, on a scale of 10, would perhaps acquit the offender, because it is so close. And as the discussion between the protagonist and her friend goes on, even she puts those questions to her and says, you know, at what stage did you say or articulate no? And then she says, uh, and she makes a good point, which is, we don't know what is going on in the mind of the boy, but we surely know from what you're telling me what was going on in your mind. So it is your truth, and that is something that adjudicators, judges need to understand, that it is the victim's truth that needs to be appreciated at the end of the day. I mean, these are close cases. So, as I said, as judges, you need to be exposed to this. If you are not exposed to this, you will make up, you watch up cases, you will, irrespective of what the law says, you cannot breathe life into law unless you have either a lived experience, or you are known of someone who's experienced, or you've been exposed to something like this, which these young actors have sought to, bring forth. So these are my opening comments. We can take it further. I mean, I don't think any the panelists. I don't want to bore them with legal technicalities, but that's what I think it is. But wonderful. I want to see it again whenever you do an update, without being a panelist.
Thank you. No, I think your comments are not boring anyone, and they are really interesting. And I'm going to come back to you. As you said, these are your opening comments. So I'll come back to you after a round of opening comments. Anuja, from your own experience, working as a counselor, working with the victims of child sexual abuse, incest, working as an educator, what was your reaction to some of the issues raised in the play?
Hi everyone, and Malika again. I'll join everyone else to say how brilliantly written and performed and acted this play was, and certainly raising a lot of issues that people are grappling with. And I'm with you when you're talking about how something like this cannot rest, because it's an ongoing conversation, and we've just started having these kind of conversations. So congratulations on doing this. I'm wondering where it leaves you as a performer every time actually playing the same role. That would be interesting to know, but at a later stage. Urvashi, I'm trying to look at, of course, the area of work I'm doing very specifically is a little different, because we are working with women who have been sexually abused as children, and then we are not looking really so much at that time at issues of consent when you're 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's much more clear cut, if you know what I mean, at that age. But a couple of things that I could relate to in the play and in what we work with. One is, why now? Okay, why 16 years later are you actually wanting to talk about it? So it raises the question of, when are women, when is the right, if at all, time to disclose something that has happened to you? Okay, which is, somehow people think that you should have said at the time that it happened. And if you're saying it later, then it's not important enough. So that's, I think, one thing which I find greatly in parallel with the women that we work with. The other thing, of course, is, across is the issues of belief and disbelief. And this case is supposedly very sort of minor, kind of an issue of transgression located within larger issue of desire and consent, and then suddenly, and in a very sudden sort of abrupt way, and everything happens so fast that the woman couldn't, beyond saying, wait, what? She couldn't really respond, and things happened. So for people to understand that as non-consensual behavior, I mean, a non-consensual act happening, is really tough, for people to be able to catch that, and move. And one of the things we hear all the time in the work that we do is also this, it's small, it's too small. Why are you even bothering to bring it up? Or what are you traumatized about? Or why is it still something important? Why is it still with you? And what Malika is saying in terms of, I feel violated, and what Justice Shakdar has also said, that it's the feeling of the victim, because very often we don't know, we don't have necessarily at least in cases of incest and child sexual abuse, when we are working with women in therapy, we don't have the perpetrator in front of us, okay? And we know that it is the, what is going to decide what is abusive and not abusive. Is it the intent of the perpetrator? Definitely. And what the victim or the survivor is left feeling is really, really important. What is the meaning that she has given to that act, And I was reading one of the comments in the chat, which earlier, which said that, okay, had this woman sort of just moved on and said, hey, it was a slip, it happened in desire, in the middle of desire, and this man, was not meaning to transgress me, would the whole thing have changed, So what is the feeling, what is the meaning the woman has given it, how has she experienced that particular event is actually key, especially in this particular play that comes out. It's really important. And as I said, that in this play is a little different from what we deal with, where transgressions are much more clear, and the age gap is much more, and the relationship is very definitely one of abuse, and it's not necessarily coming within the context of a consensual activity. Okay, so I think these are some of the parallels that I would like to draw, starting out, and then, let's see how the discussion goes.
Thanks, Anuja. I'm also guessing that one possible other parallel could be that when we are looking at consent among adults, the assumption is that you're looking at a level playing ground, and there is a kind of equal relationship where one can ask and the other one can say yes or no. Whereas that context is seldom there, especially between genders. So I mean, in the kind of work you do too, I guess that would apply.
Yeah, and also the fact that if, in my work, especially this, I mean, obviously this comes up a lot, but in the context of when you have been sexually abused as a child, your ability to say yes or no as an adult is deeply compromised,
Yeah.
So that's a little different from, but that's the way I would relate to, the work and the consent, and the way what comes up specifically in my therapy work and work with women survivors of childhood incest. Yeah.
Thank you. Let me turn to Vrinda. Vrinda, for your opening comments on the play and some of the issues we are talking about. I mean, I have a whole bunch of questions for you and everybody else, but I'm going to hold them for the second round.
Thanks, Urvashi. Good evening to everyone. And thank you, Malika. I have never seen this performance before in any form. And I wonder why I missed it all these years. But it's a very powerful performance. And I actually agree with Justice Shakdar. it's the kind of space it leaves you where you want to be quiet for a while and process a lot on your own, and maybe then come back to the discussion subsequently. It speaks to me in multiple ways. I heard many voices of women who one has met in the course of one's work, as friends, as family. I also heard voices of the police, of the neighbor, of the court. All of them were very much there. And I'm really, what I really, really want to thank you for is that you know, all the nuances, the facets, the dimensions were brought out, because it is very, very easy to have a black and white conversation, which is the conversation the state is constantly trying to compel us to have on the issue of sexual violence. And we know that the subject is so complex that unless we are going to have a conversation that is full of gray, we are not going to be able to actually take the steps we need to take forward. So I think the fact that you spoke about set it in a context of a relationship, etc., was very important and powerful. My what I would say here actually is that the larger question that I have, having worked in this field now for a fair number of years and engaged with many women, I have, and this could be a provocative question, I have often asked myself, um, is the criminal law, the criminal justice system at all designed to hear the voices of women? And whether any amount of sensitization is going to work towards taking the system as a whole forward. And the reason why I say this is because what is it that the woman is seeking actually? She is seeking, and for instance, why does anybody speak after 15 years? There is a need to have that acknowledged. The wrong needs to be acknowledged. The wrong, there is a denial of the wrong, both sometimes within ourselves and of course from the external world. Are there other ways in which this acknowledgement can be done, which are social? It's not a private issue. It's not to be done in in a little room where somebody says, oh, I'm sorry, I did this to you. That's not at all what I'm saying. There have to be other modes of public acknowledgement and public of the wrong that was done to her. I totally agree. The conversation is, and I hope the conversation doesn't rest, and I hope it keeps on. We keep on raising more and different issues here, and of course. There is enough around, the law and courts are a tree that never stops giving. You will have a new script every week and every month, so you know where to put your thanks to. But honestly, I really think where we are in a place where there are such deep inherent prejudices, biases, which sometimes I feel, the actors in the system actually don't even know that they are beset with this, and it just comes to the surface. And for instance, the whole judgment of skin to skin, and now apparently there are 2 to 3, and it's been given by a woman judge. Honestly, I'm glad this conversation is happening, because I'm one of those who has for long been saying that please stop running after women police and women judges. It's not going to work. It's a tokenism that is not going to work for us. There is, what is at play is something much, much more, embedded inside us. And so we need to open the conversation and go beyond just looking at people through who they are from the outside, to expect a nuanced understanding. And in fact, many of us, our experiences speak to the contrary when we walk the path of the criminal justice system with these women. As we go forward, we'll talk about more things, but I think what we need to also talk about is what are the other avenues where this kind of anxiety and all needs to be addressed? And is there a, when we look at the issue of consent, a lot of the emphasis here was on the no. And actually, when I read the law, according to me, the law says, did you hear the yes? The law does not say, did you hear the no? And that's written into the words of the law. The law is asking that you move ahead if you hear a yes. It's true that the kind of world we are living in, nobody's asking for anybody's consent, and least of all women's consent or the girl child's consent or a person who's held in custody's consent about anything. So would consent be asked in such circumstances? But whether we need to shift the conversation from even within law to not did you say the no, but did you hear a yes? And unless you heard the yes, the onus is on you. And I think that really is the fundamental shift. And that's a shift of power. It's not a shift of evidence. With that, power will shift between the two genders. And that, to my mind, is the crux that we have to work with. I'll stop there, Urvashi.
So, Brinda, you have predictably responded to many of the questions that I was going to raise, including this last one about the yes. So that was one of the key questions that I wanted to put to all of you, that why is it that we focus so much on the no and the quality of the no? And why in relationships where there is so much inequality built in, that especially in male-female relationships, if you're talking about those, women don't have the right to say no to many things. So how here is the court expecting them to say a clear-cut no? And why don't we look at whether she said yes or whether what he did? And in this instance also in the play, the question is not being asked about what his intention was. Why did he remove the condom? I mean, by the lawyer in the lawyerly conversation, but more about did you stop him from doing it or not? So one is the issue of that onus shifting. The other, actually, all of you have talked about, Justice Sakhtar, you articulated it as judges need to be sensitive to life and law. Brinda talked about that too, about the nuance and how the incapability of the legal system to grasp that nuance, and the need for looking for other avenues which can provide a sense of being heard, a sense of being acknowledged, a sense of healing. So I wonder if you might comment on that. I mean, is the law completely incapable of it? Training of judges or investigators, does that help at all? Or as somebody located within the law, and Anuja, you as somebody located within a system which provides some kind of therapeutic counseling, healing, what are the avenues that can provide this acknowledgement that a victim may so desperately need and seek, and which can, the search for which can go on for years?
Just before Justice Shankar speaks, I'm not saying move out of the law. I would be the last person to say that.
I know you're not. No, and I'm not saying that either. I'm just saying there seems to be, it seems to be at odds. The nuance, the issue of life, feeling, and law. And is there somewhere we can reach a middle path? You have to unmute yourself, Justice Sakhtar. Sorry. No, you're still muted.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
This mouse can be a little bit of a pain. But anyway, so Urvashi, one of the things that sort of has repeatedly come about in the public domain is about, and which was also there at the play, is about, especially when there is a delay between the event incident happening and the reporting. So there's this hiatus, and people say, why now? And that, in a sense, dovetails into what you just said, is at some stage, the victim feels that, did I do, that's my view, I could be wrong, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that did I do myself disservice by not articulating, not only for myself, but for all others who are similarly circumstanced. So she decides someday to open up, and then people shut her up by saying, listen, it's too late. You're doing it for motivated reasons. So as the character asked, friend asks the victim here, the actor, that, or the other panelist said, is it for revenge? Is it for, and these are the kind of questions that come up. And then in this Me Too movement, this was one of the questions, can you do it after 40 years? We have live cases which are going on, etc., etc. I don't think it is that, and especially in, I don't like to say in India, because I think it's happening world over, because they're asking the same questions of victims over there also. I think it takes a lot for anyone to literally, deal with these details in public, this humiliation in public. And if a person decides to do that, the least that she expects is a certain amount of sensitivity, conducive atmosphere, someone who's willing to at least help her articulate what she's gone through. Which again brings us back to the question is, how should, and I'm talking now from the point of view of court, because, how should the judge deal with it? Vrinda is right. What she said is the law. Now the question is, when adjudicators or judges deal with it, they go through evidence and then they try and link up and suss up the evidence and try and find out which way did it go. Was it consensual? And if it was consensual, did the consent break at some stage? You see, I think sometimes people get confused that if I've consented once, that yes continues throughout the act. I, for one, would say that you could at any stage, like in any relationship, say, sorry, no further, correct? So this is what the character was trying to depict, that, yeah, she did up to a point desire, overtook and consent, etc., etc. But at some point she said, this is not what I want to go on with, or want to proceed in a particular manner. So, but there have been judgments, sadly, of our court where they have said, now no means yes, or something like that. I read somewhere, and I was a little, I'm a little flummoxed myself. So my view, and this is my view, actually, there is this raging debate about marital rape also. And I actually wanted to talk to some people and how they feel about it. They always tell you that this is something, it is so difficult to prove, you are going to pry into the bedroom of a couple and therefore you shouldn't do it. I think it's complete nonsense. What you are looking for is the same thing, whether you are married or not. You're saying, did she consent to have sexual intercourse on a particular day or on that particular point in time? It may be difficult to prove, but to say that you shouldn't, it shouldn't be an offense, is something that I find difficult to accept. But there are judges, various philosophies, they will tell you that no, it will break down the entire edifice of marriage, etc., etc. So, so unfortunately, or whichever way you look at it, an institution comprises of people of various ideologies, philosophies, thought process. Sometimes it works to your advantage, sometimes it works to your disadvantage. So, as I said right at the beginning, you need to put it out there for people to discuss. The more you discuss, the more people will become aware, and that's the only way to correct it. And I also take the point, and I have always believed when a lot of people say, "Oh, we must." If it's juveniles, it should be headed by a woman. If it is POCSO cases, it should be headed by a woman. Family courts, because it's about the sensitivity of a human being. It doesn't make a difference whether I'm a man or a woman. I mean, a man can be as harsh or a woman can be as harsh to these kind of situations or insensitive. So gender doesn't matter. It's how you've been brought up. What are your lived experiences? How do you absorb your experiences? So women police, women judges, because it's mental. It's a mental work. I mean, it's not lifting weights that I need a man for something and a woman for something else. So lots of points, but therefore and as you asked, would training of judges help? Training, yes, but you need to devise training tools. Now, if I were we have a judicial academy, I would tell them, go and watch this play. That's your training. Because you cannot ram it down through sections and tell them interpretations. It just doesn't help. You have to do something like this. Show them a movie. There's this movie about Judy Foster's movie. What was that? I don't remember. Some of you would remember, where she was, I think she was playing the role of a prostitute, and she goes to a place where she is kind of raped by all those who are gathered around the billiards table. And so that raised that issue. So I would actually expose them to these kind of study material where they see how these issues are dealt with, and that's how you get sensitive. I mean, a prosaic method of teaching will not help. So yes, judges need to get sensitive. That's when you will improve the construction of law. So the beauty about judging is the same section can be read literally, but you can also be creative enough to adapt to a situation such as this. Yeah.
Thank you. Malika, this point about you need to talk about it, talk more about these issues, bring them out into the open. What is your sense of that? Because that is one way of, the conversations are so hidden and people are so, and there isn't even a vocabulary through which people can talk about it. But do you think this is one way of, within quotes, normalizing such conversations?
I mean, I think it's cyclical. The thing is that I have been able to talk about it because there was a conversation that had started to exist, because I am also existing in a context. And now that I am able to have this conversation, there are more conversations that it's churning. So I feel like there's simply no other way out of it but to talk about it. One has to sort of like keep churning the conversation. It's the only way the conversation goes forward. This incident is an incident from my life. And just to kind of bring it back to what Brinda was saying about looking for ways to have public acknowledgement. I mean, I guess I created my own way of having a public acknowledgement about all of this. And actually, the beautiful part of all of this is that the perpetrator is immaterial. He's absolutely immaterial to this entire conversation. It doesn't matter whether he says sorry to me or not. It does not matter whether he watches this or not. I'm curious because there's literally 1 degree of separation between him and me. If I want it, he can watch it. And all the people that I speak about. But it doesn't matter, because what happens in the speaking of this story is, one, the number of people, unfortunately, who say that they've gone through this, which kind of makes you feel less alone. It's an unfortunate, it's a dark sort of beauty, there's a darkness to this beauty where you feel solidarity in something that is terrible, that this has happened to me as well, and you feel like less alone. And there is a place to talk about it. I mean, in the coming of the chorus, it's actually the adding of the chorus has done so many wonderful things in process, that so many women have, so many members of the chorus in the workshop, etc., have also said that not the same, but similar things have happened, or they know of these things that have happened, and they too go through their own grief and trauma, which is difficult for them when we talk about this. in the performing of the play, while listening to us. So I'm actually quite, I feel like this storytelling of various ways, theater is one of them, it is a community too, of dealing with trauma. It is sort of like because theater is a community activity, it kind of deals with that. I think I've just gone wherever I wanted to go, but I'll shut up now.
Yes, you have. But I think that's really interesting to say the perpetrator is immaterial. She's found her own way of dealing with it. And I think, I mean, that would be great if many people could do that. Let me turn to Anuja. Anuja, your sort of comments on really what are the ways in which I guess women can, or victims can, find some kind of resolution which are not located necessarily inside the courts. In your experience, what does that, how does that come about?
I think therapy, definitely. When people are working their traumas through, one is looking at community, as Malika mentioned, is very important. A sense of solidarity. This, survivors sort of coming together and talking about what happened to them. A little different from what Malika you mentioned about if this is an incident from your life and the abuser, the person, I don't know how you meant what you called him. The other man is somebody who's immaterial to you, is a little different when it comes to cases of incest, when the abuser is actually somehow very central to your own recovery, unfortunately. And the part of the work that we do is how do you make, because the abuser is a family member and very much still part of your family. And a lot of the work that we do is, trying to take women through a process of recovery without making the abuser central, actually, and making their own healing very central, which becomes all the more difficult if they are face to face with the abuser all the time in their, in their particular circumstance. But yes, I think certainly community. And for example, and one of the things that we do with survivors as a way of them coping and moving beyond is telling their story, pretty much the way you have done it, Malika, telling your story, but from a place of, something that takes forward their own healing. And this whole question of revenge is quite interesting, because we have always found that any action that is coming out of revenge really tends to backfire. But if it is coming out of you wanting to heal, then it actually works for you. But also to comment on the fact that, what are people looking for? What are women looking for? And I would say an apology. I mean, I've been working for 25 years with survivors of incest, and the majority of them don't want to approach the criminal justice system. For them, justice doesn't lie within the criminal justice system at all, and especially in cases of incest, because they want to protect the abuser. They don't, they may love the abuser, and there's so many reasons. But what they are looking for is really, as Brinda, you also mentioned, an acknowledgement of what happened, because otherwise people are telling them it didn't happen. They grow up hearing that it didn't happen. So an acknowledgement of what happened, because telling the truth and having it heard is really the only way to restore a sense of justice and healing, both for in the individual as well as in society. So you have to be able to be heard, to be acknowledged, not only that it happened, but that it harmed you, and that we are sorry that it happened to you. An apology by the person who did it, an apology by the family members who did not actually listen to her. And I think, Malika, in the play, what struck me was, you could put down that whole incident of the fact that he took off the condom, and he didn't really ask you, because I found that everything happened so swiftly. It could be like he didn't want to use a condom, he didn't want to, really do that. And but what was really important is that he didn't apologize. The behavior you spoke about later really spoke to the fact that, hey, he didn't even, there was no accountability here, and I think that is what, and when you talk about why 16 years later somebody wants to talk about it, is because you're left with this sense nothing happened. Something happened, and I was just like, there's nobody accountable for it. And that's living with that sense is also what prompts people to talk about it many, many years later. And I think in the play, and in your case, if it was what, there's always also a kind of a trigger, that makes you talk about it, and you talk about it in the play as it being, looking at his photographs and looking at him becoming this yoga teacher, and looking and saying, what the hell, this is this is duplicity, and this is fraud, and what that does, to you, and makes you even more angry, and say, hey, I think I need to talk about it. And then what's one last point I want to say, I'm certainly not well versed with the law or anything, but I think there is another point in the law where people, judges and all, increasingly seem to be more sympathetic towards the perpetrator, the criminal, and somehow the gravity, quote unquote, of the offense is not seen to be enough to warrant the kind of sentence, which also comes up in the play in a way, कि इतना छोटा सा चीज था यार, अभी तक तो सब ठीक ही चल रहा था, only because he didn't didn't use a condom. Does it, the poor fellow, does he really deserve a punishment? And I think that is also such a dangerous precedent, and we've seen that in the recent POCSO judgments that have been happening. But to come back, I think storytelling, to be heard, to tell your story from a position of not feeling like a victim but feeling like a survivor who's feeling empowered, is really important, because the stories of trauma actually often tend to come out in a way that is not linear, you know, and but that is the nature of how trauma affects you, So I think that's what I would say. Solidarity, truth telling, storytelling is really ways that people can move forward, other ways that people can move forward.
Anuja, I have a couple of additional questions arising from what you have said. So you talked about apology, which I agree is a very important thing, or acknowledgement, which Brinda also referred to. But in some ways, sometimes apology can be too easy. How you can just apologize and that's it. You go away with no consequences to yourself, which is what we often find perpetrators tend to do or to suggest. So how to understand apology, or I don't know how to understand that an apology is.
Yeah, because
can I just add an additional question, because I think it's linked. You talked about revenge as not being a good place to start, or the desire for revenge, and you're right over there. But what then to do with the continuing unresolved subterranean anger at the lack of acknowledgement, resolution, etc.?
I think the apology question, let me start with that. And I think, we have survivors we have worked with whose abusers have apologized. And they ended up in feeling really cheated because it didn't work for them, because they apologized because of some pressure, because they apologized as a way of getting away. And, people in the family, like the mother, in one particular case, the brother was the abuser, and the mother said, "Ab to, he has apologized, now you move on," But the point is that the apology was really just made with just passing and saying, let me cover my ass, let me apologize, and get out of this whole thing. So I think the nature of apology really needs to be looked at. What is it? Where is it coming from? How genuine is it? Does it have a sense of reflection of the harm that I have caused? Is it articulating and saying, I understand that this is the harm and I want to listen to you? So there is a nature of apology. If you were apologized in a certain way, when that apology works, and it would work. And it's interesting that I don't know if you've read Eve Ensler's book, The Apology. but you know, she really lists out. Have you heard of that book, Urvashi? Yeah, and she was, I think, in Delhi in 2019, and I was interviewing her on her book, The Apology, and she does. She really, it's good to read because she states very clearly the ingredients of an apology before it can actually have a healing power. Okay, so it's about the how, the intention. Is it just to sort of get away by saying that? Because that never works, you know. But if it is genuine, then you experience the remorse, okay, of the person who has done it. And we have people like that as well. We have abusers who feel a genuine sense of remorse. And if you could actually mediate, and one of our fantasies has been actually always that if abusers were to come for help, you know, we would mediate this apology, you know, we would mediate, you know, and to see that it happens in a way that it works for survivors. So that's what I would say for the apology question. And for the other question, I mean, I'm of a strong believer that you need to process your, you know, the rage. It's again, there's a difference between anger and rage. Okay, anger is the backbone of healing. You have to feel angry if you have to feel angry when there is a wrong. Okay, so anger can also be channelized into a healing force, but rage and revenge really need to be processed, okay, in a way. And I'm a therapist, so I would always say that, hey, come to me for therapy, let's process this high level of rage and anger, because from here, if you take an action, it is not going to work. Let us process it. I'm not saying you have to not feel angry, okay, but let's you know what you asked, that how do you continually deal with the anger. It's a question of processing it in a place where it becomes a channelizing force rather than a destructive force. And certainly therapy and community and solidarity helps to do that. And we've seen people go through that cycle. It's not that it's not possible. It is possible to do that. And then from that space to be telling your story has a lot of power and has a lot of impact, than actually, because, there's a what we call the dialectic of trauma. You want to shout it out from the rooftop, or you want to completely deny it. Okay, neither of it works. And recovery lies in the middle. That how do you tell your story, and how do you keep the anger, but you're not raving and ranting, and destroying. The experience of it afterwards leaves you feeling depleted rather than energized, and that is the difference.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn to you now to give you the impossible task, which I know you will do extremely competently, which is to pull together so many of the ideas that have been articulated here. So, on the importance of channeling anger, on looking at revenge, on looking at apology, but also the question of education and the content of education for people who are in positions of responsibility, such as the judiciary, the legal profession, and so on. And crucially, something that you know very well, which is the importance of community and solidarity, which from your long involvement in the women's movement is something you also know that has been something that women activists have talked about. So if you could comment on these things, and I know you had other things you wanted to say, so now's your chance.
Thanks, Urvashi. It's been a rich discussion. I'll just add a few things and then try and respond to the issues you've raised. And they're interlinked. When we talk about, how will the criminal justice system understand, comprehend, I think there are certain missing pieces of the puzzle which we haven't yet started work on. I completely agree with what Justice Chakter says, that what is the nature of this sensitization? Because we're not allowed to say judicial training, we will call it orientation, sensitization, be what it may. I think all of us should be trained repeatedly about everything. So what is it that we want to bring to them? And I think we can see the change, at least in a place like Delhi, where there were some workshops, interactions where people like Suzette Jordan came and spoke. Sex workers addressed prosecutors, judges, the cops. You had a trans person speaking to them. It actually, you had people from the lesbian gay movement come and speak to them. So there has been some kind of interface which starts unsettling the apprehensions, the anxieties of the other. And I think we see some impact of that taking place. It needs to be done repeatedly. It needs to be done everywhere. Plays like what Malika has shown, and because it is now in digital form, I think it would be absolutely phenomenal if it is shown at all judicial academies, and every state now has a judicial academy, and so it can reach out to very large number of people. I think what we also need to talk about in these places is about letting them hear what the harm is. In criminal law, punishment is given for harm. What is the injury? It's something that the play speaks about, Anuja speaks about, that, if it's just somebody fingering your vagina so many years ago, or even 2 months ago, what is the harm that has been caused to her? Unless you are going to see it from the vantage point of this person, this woman, or the girl child, or child, any child, you are not going to understand what is the harm. And then you are going to be very reluctant to give any punishment for it. I'm all for rationalization of sentencing. I think there is very high sentencing being given for sexual violence, and we need to have a discussion around that, which we are not being able to convene. But I do think that harm needs to be reinterpreted and understood for purposes of sexual violence. And only then can we even move to things like marital rape, because right now there is a denial, unless, of course, there is somebody who's very severely physically and sexually assaulted. Then, of course, there is an uproar, and we want nothing short of immediate noose around the person's neck. So we are swinging between these two, and somewhere the judiciary is also feeding into that. I also think that one other piece that we need to work on, and here the work is required perhaps with the police and the prosecution, how do we bring this trauma into the courtroom? Because if you want to understand this harm, you need to bring that evidence in. Never, and I have actually had conversations with the police and the prosecutor to absolutely know, with no success, saying that in order to understand this, I need an expert. I need a psychiatrist to step in, to tell them why she is speaking the way she is speaking. For instance, and I accept that men particularly, and also many women, are genuinely puzzled. How does a woman react after rape? I've often wanted to write one long, book with one sentence. Malika is better placed than me to express things like this. I have known clients who have done very different things, from going to a bar, to going to their home, to going to India Gate, to doing very, very different things. There is no rule of what a woman is going to do after a sexual assault. But the court is looking for that pattern. The court has a prototype in mind. How do I dislodge that? I'm not allowed to bring in evidence where a person who's an expert will speak to the court. We have a prosecution and a police system which is barely believing anything, is now registering cases, nahi to upar se dant padegi, a prosecution which is least interested in anything that is happening in the trial court. As we speak, there is a high profile rape case going on, not in Delhi, and I will not disclose, where the woman has been cross-examined for a few weeks. 700 pages of evidence in cross-examination has been typed, down to the panty and the length of the arm, and how much time it will take to pull is being recorded. This is today. And I'm saying this because there is a discourse that has been developed. Oh, the court just listens to the woman. The woman steps into the witness box and the court writes conviction. It's not true. It's absolutely false. Women are having a very hard time in the courtroom. And because rape trials are in camera, nobody is going to get to know what's going on inside. So now that confidentiality is actually turning around to bite us because we can't speak about it. We can't tell anyone what is happening. So, and courts are actually, judges are allowing this to happen. Ad nauseum, it's happening. So we need to really shake up the system. And there is a false narrative being constructed about how courts are convicting. Men are having a bad time. Women are pursuing men through filing false cases. That's not what is happening in real life. Even today, 6 out of 10 women who will come to me will not go to the police because there is no reason to ruin the rest of your life trying to engage with a system that is hostile and harsh. And so most women are still choosing to not engage with the criminal legal system. So we have to come to terms with what is going on over here amongst us. There was a reference made about, who does the court believe? The court is actually very happy and almost eager to be the knight in shining armor because the court will protect women. Courts need to understand that women are not coming to court to seek protection. We are coming to court to assert our rights. And that is what she's saying in the witness box. So if it is a case where something terrible has happened and body parts have been pulled out and it's a gang rape, etc., particularly between strangers, every court will give the harshest, and there will be the language written which you would think that, now women are never going to see a bad day in life. And the same courts, when the woman is perhaps a sex worker, perhaps in a relationship, perhaps drinking, then we are going to be told, this is not all fine going on here. So women are not coming. I think courts really need to stop seeing themselves as protectors of women, because that's not what the law or the equation between the woman who goes to court and the adjudication process is meant to be. And this protection is actually hurting us now. For instance, I'll take an example. The name and identity of the woman is not to be disclosed. Every judgment is coming and nailing that part over and over again. Media houses have been fined, penalized for naming. Can we ask this question? Is that really what's going to take us forward? There are situations where maybe naming is helpful. Maybe the dynamics of a situation need to be understood. There have been cases where the family is willing to disclose the name. But the law is so stringent today that if you were to disclose a name, that media house will be strung upside down. The biggest issue seems to be, do not disclose. I'm not talking about children. I'm talking about adults. I'm also talking about where the girl child was dead and the parents had no issue in disclosing the name. There is a reason why this confidentiality was created. It's not in order to create secrecy and silence, and it's going down that route. So we have to have conversations about these things. The law can't, today what is happening in a rape trial, nobody will get to know. She can't speak about it herself. What happens in a sexual harassment IC committee, the woman can be totally mauled apart by the committee. The law prohibits her from speaking out about it. She can be penalized for speaking out. So we need to really revisit, what are we creating? This is not such a black and white situation. These are engagements that need to continuously have. And I think courts need to engage with the lives of women in different ways. I don't know what you were asking me, but I had these things that I just had to share. We get very few chances to actually speak beyond what is written in the law. And the law has almost become a scripture in one's life. But to talk about, so you said, what are the challenges? I actually believe, and I've done cases both of child sexual abuse of very little children as well as adult women, the process can be therapeutic. The criminal justice system process can be therapeutic. But there are certain key elements to that. First of all, the whole journey has to be enabling inside the court, outside the court, with the lawyers, and as you said, with friends, family, women's rights groups, actually standing by. And maybe for many years, because cases do take very long. It doesn't matter what they write in the law book and whether designated courts are created, cases just take long. It's the nature of things. So if that solidarity and enabling environment is there, it can be therapeutic for some people. If it's not there, it will actually become extremely difficult for her to survive. And so that would be my take on how do we look at education, how do we look at these kind of things as we move forward. And I think we need to present complexities to court. Courts don't know how to deal with complexities. One of the reasons is, and that I myself as a lawyer don't have an answer to, I grapple with it. In order to punish somebody, the person who is the judicial officer is actually taking a very serious call on personal liberty. And therefore, that complexity has to come together to some extent. So that is the difficulty. And that is why I'm saying the nature of evidence, how do you understand what she's saying? Courts, we have not given them tools to interpret her voice and her language. So that's a lot of work to be done. For instance, in this case, it's about the condom. How about a case where the man does penetrate but does not ejaculate? What do you do? Is there an explanation? Is there somewhere that somebody can help us understand what is happening? We are not giving the courts ways of understanding what is going on in society.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Brinda. And there's a whole lot to think of there. But now I think we have to close. We don't have time to continue. And as I often say, that the mark of a good conversation is when it feels incomplete when you're closing it. So there's a whole lot of things for us to think about. Thank you all, Malika, the entire group, Justice Akhtar, Anuja, Brinda, and Haq for organizing this performance and for the discussion. And we'll keep talking and hope that we arrive at some ways of dealing with this very complex problem. So thank you very much. Malika, you want to say something?
I just want to say thank you to Bharti and Preeti from Haq, because they've been extremely supportive, and it's really our first show of the year. And what a fantastic conversation to be a part of. So really, thank you very much. And to Zuban, because without them, this process would not have started. This play would not have started. So Urvashi, thank you too. So just
you're saying that because we commissioned it long ago, and then it's grown and grown and grown. So,
Great.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. And
Good
Malika,
night.
good to meet you. Let's be in touch. Bye, Urvashi.
Bye.
Bye, Brinda. Bye, Justice Shikdar.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless.
Thanks, Haq. Thanks, Malika.
Yeah, thanks.